Hello guys, welcome to another episode of the Calm Slowly podcast. This is episode 47 and I'm joined by my guest today, Jill Wright. Jill is a mindset coach. She's also a time management guru, which is awesome. That's what we want to really dwell into. She's also a host of her own podcast, Grow Like a Mother, which I recommend you go and check out after this. Hello Jill, how are you?
I'm great. How are you, Callum?
I'm good, thank you. What's the weather like over where you are right now? Whereabouts are you?
I'm in Canada, and we're right in the thick of fall, so it's rainy and dark. But that's okay. Yeah,
I haven't. You know, I've had more Canadians on my show than I've had anywhere else. British, American. I've had when I go through all of my episodes. And you know what? If I have a look at sort of when I've looked into like my audience on my podcast and stuff, Canada is a big portion of people of my listeners. So hello to my Canadians out there. I've never been, but
you have to come.
I'll have to go.
Mm-hmm.
And my wife she's allergic to the sun, right? Of all the things to be allergic to. So I did say to her only yesterday, do you know what? We should go to Canada because you should be okay there.
Absolutely.
So we are also streaming here in my group, so saying hello to my Shape Sully ladies as well. Hello, Anne. So, Jill, I'm not going to do the usual tell me about yourself spiel. I was sort of checking out some of your stuff, and I know that you host your own podcast as well. So just talk to me a little bit, first of all, about your show, Grow Like a Mother, and what sort of got you? What made you start that?
It's kind of a long story, but the Coles notes of it are. I went through a really difficult time in the early years of my kids' lives. So it was right at the pandemic when everything sort of came to a head, and I was expecting to have them in daycare so that I could open up a retail business. I had quit my corporate job. I was all in to open up this retail business. And then, of course, the world shut down. And I was also at the time suffering really badly from postpartum depression and anxiety. And I realized that I needed to sort of save myself, if you will, because nobody was going to come save me. I couldn't change my external circumstances. And so I really dove deep into personal development. And I realized as I was doing this work that it wasn't tailored towards moms, especially working moms. It was a bunch of information that was great in theory, but I couldn't figure out in the beginning how to implement it into my life. And so that's where I started, is taking these personal development, time management, productivity, goal setting ideas, the mindset work, and making it accessible for working moms, and decided that the best way to share that information would be through a podcast. And so I started the Grow Like a Mother podcast. It's been almost 2 years that I've been doing it. And it's really fun because we get to talk. I get to do solo episodes where I can just share some wisdom of whatever I've got going on. And then I also bring on some guests and we talk about more specific things that I don't know as much about, you know? So it's been a really fun journey, and we've been able to really achieve some cool things with the moms who listen.
I'm the kind of same. I started my podcast in 2020. I think that seems to be quite a popular outcome now, which is a lot of people. Lockdown happened, the pandemic happened, and it kind of encouraged people to go, okay, well, what now? What do I do? And yeah, that's about when I started doing the same. Very similar to you. I do my solo stuff, but I've also created a lot of relationships, working relationships from having guests on my podcast that I've then gone on to do a lot of work with as well. So it's been one of the best things I personally did, not just for my business, but just for my own, what's the term? So just knowledge on life. I've learned so much. I've had people learn about menopause. I've learned so much about that. I've had mindset coaches. I've had dietitians. I've had public speakers. as I'm sure you're aware, Joe. It's pretty enlightening doing it. So the title itself, Grow Like a Mother, I mean, you say that it's sort of inspired from your own experience as a mother. What is it that sort of, in general, got you into that kind of thing? Not just a podcast itself, but what inspired you to share your, study and share your wisdom with people on that topic?
It was really because in my inner circle of friends and family, everybody, unbeknownst to me, but was viewing me as sort of a super mom. And I felt like I was drowning, but from the outside, everyone's like, oh, well, you've got it all together. You're able to do this and that and blah, blah, blah. And it was really eye-opening for me because I realized, oh, no one's talking about the fact that this is hard. And no one's talking about, like, nobody understands the reason that it looks like I have it all together is because I'm doing the work. I'm asking for help. I'm getting my rest. Like, I'm learning about these tools that are supporting me. So it was kind of double, two-pronged almost. I think we need to talk about how hard it is and the fact that if we're doing the work, that it's important to discuss and have other people in community who are also doing the work. But also that it might not look like, people might not understand everything that's going on behind the scenes. So bringing it all to light, really, and helping other moms just understand that they're not having a unique experience necessarily. We all go through the same challenges and we can be a village for each other because that's getting harder and harder to find. Yeah.
One of the things that you call yourself is a time management guru, which a lot of my ladies in my group got excited about, because one thing that people really do struggle with, there's a couple of things in my experience as a fitness professional that not just in the world of fitness, but in general, there's two things that come up that really are barriers for people. One is motivation, and the other one is time management. We have 24 hours in a day, every day, right, Jill? But why is it so? Why is it so difficult? Like, why do people get overwhelmed so much? Even though we have this copious amount of time, we really don't, do we? And you mentioned the word drowning before, and I can relate to that. And I think a lot of people listening to this will relate to that, where you just feel like you're drowning in overwhelm. And even the first one I said before, motivation, I think that still kind of falls into time, because one of the reasons I find people aren't motivated is because they've not had time to sort of sit and actually reflect on their goals and barriers and stuff. So what is your advice here? Like, what is that? Why do they fall so down on this downward trajectory as a result? And people say, I just don't have the time for this.
Right. It's such a loaded question. I've got like 300 things that are in my mind that I want to share, but I'll start with just acknowledging that we all have the same 24 hours. Nobody has more or less time. And that, I think, gives people two things. It gives them a bit of freedom to say, oh, right, I can be as productive as whoever they're comparing themselves to. But it also gives them a bit of a kick in the pants, like, oh, right, I have that too, right? Like, we all have the same amount. I have the same opportunity. So it gives them a bit of motivation that way. But the first thing I always identify is you need to stop comparing your life and the way that you're spending your time to somebody else. Because we can create a lot of guilt and overwhelm that way, looking specifically, not comparing ourselves to people whose real life we're privy to, but people we see on the internet, right? That's only a small piece of the pie. And of course, only what people want you to see. And so there's a lot of guilt and shame that can come from comparing. So that's the first thing that I work with people on. And that's a mindset shift, right? Like, how do we stop comparing ourselves? That's a whole other podcast. The second thing that I like to continue with is having people really find their values and where they want to spend their time. Because if we look at it, we do a calendar audit, and we identify in a week, let's say, where are you actually spending your time? Write it down, even if it's like feeding the dog, doing kids' homework, scrolling on Instagram, like write it all down for a week. See where your time is really going and compare that to what your values are. Is your values like family time? Is it healthy living? Is it adventure? Whatever your values are, is your activities reflecting that? And if it's not, it's time to make some shifts, right? Because time is going to feel more productive. You're going to feel a lot less overwhelmed if you're doing activities that are aligned with the things that are important to you. And the third piece of the puzzle is asking for help and saying no. So there's a rule that I like to live by. If it's not a heck yes, it has to be a heck no, right? If it's not something you're jumping up and down excited to do, you're allowed to say no to it. And now that my kids are in school, for me, that looks like, parent-teacher council, right? Or baking cupcakes or volunteering for the trips. If it's not a heck yes for me, it's okay that it's a no, and it should be a no, because with that 24 hours, we really want to be intentional about how we spend it. And it's such a drain for everybody if you're spending your time doing things that don't excite you. There are 3 options of how to sort of move into letting go of things that you don't want to do and keeping the things that you're wanting to do that you excel at that are meaningful to you. The first one is you can just ditch it completely. You don't have to do it, right? That's a choice. There's always consequences, but that is a choice. The second one is you can delegate it to somebody else. So that might look like asking for help. That might look like hiring somebody to do it. That might look like swapping with somebody else. So if it's gardening on your list and you're not a gardener, but you don't mind cleaning the house and listening to a podcast, find another mama who can garden for you and you can clean her house, or whatever the case, right? Delegate that to someone else. It doesn't have to be a financial exchange. And the third thing is you can do it. So you can ditch it, you can delegate it, or you can do it. But I find one of the hardest parts for moms is that asking for help. And the saying no. Those are 2 really big pieces that I find we need to shift our mindset around, because it's just so ingrained for us.
I like the narrowing it down to those 3 things you said before. You can either ditch it, delegate, or do it. I like that. There will be a lot of people, though, that will be thinking that's good and well, but there are something, because especially when you said before, like if it doesn't make you jump for joy, then you shouldn't feel bad saying no to doing it. But there will, of course, and I know you would have had the responses like this of people saying, yeah, but Jill, I have things to do. I'm a mom. I'm working as well. Perhaps I've run a small business. I couldn't possibly do that. There's things that I have to do. What would you say? What would you respond to that? Because I completely hear what you're saying, but I can also sympathise with people struggling to take that on board. That it's as simple as that. People tend to overcomplicate their own lives, as I'm sure you're aware. Most people, they might be nodding, listening to this. Some people will be in denial, but we create a lot of pressure ourselves. We make things harder for ourselves, and a lot of that, I believe, is denial. When you say things like ditch it, delegate, or do it, people tend to put a barrier up, be quite defensive. No, I can't. I just have to do it. What would your response be to that then? If people go, well, none of these things make me jump for joy. So what am I supposed to do?
Right. Been there. Haven't we all? Right. And on the other side of it, having tried my own advice, I can tell you a few things from a place of having gone through that. And it's funny, even as I talk about these things now, I still get a little bit triggered because of that pre-programming, like, oh, well, it's not, like you said, it's not that easy, or I can't do that, or that's not an option for me because of XYZ. And there's 2 things. The first thing is that everyone has their XYZ, right? Everyone has obligations, responsibilities, challenges. For instance, just to give you a little bit of background for my own self, I have a special needs child. And at the time I was going through all this, had a husband who was working nights and weekends, and I was solo parenting everything and starting a business. etc. Right? Like there's a lot always going on for all of us. So just to acknowledge that, to say absolutely, and to just have some space for, yeah, life is hard, and yeah, you have a lot going on, and so does she. So do I. So does everyone, right? That's in the same token of the 24 hours in a day. And it's really harsh. It's super harsh because we don't want to hear it. We don't want to take that personal responsibility. It's so much easier, especially when you have the responsibility of everything else on your plate. It's so much easier to externalize why it can't be done, right? So I always like to say, I give my clients a little bit of a kick in the pants at the same time as I'm giving them a big hug, right? Like and I'm sure you need to do the same thing with fitness, right? It's not easy, but it is possible. And the key piece is identifying those values, right? Because yes, there are things that you have to do that you don't feel like doing, right? But if you can link that to a higher value, okay, I don't want to have to do homework with the kids tonight. I don't want to have to spend my time doing that. Is education a value for you? Can you make it into family time? Is family time a value for you? Can you reframe it in some way? Because in no way am I claiming that you can just get rid of all your responsibilities. Although you could. That is a choice, right? It's not a choice many of us would make. And so within the external circumstances that we have, there are some things that are out of our control for sure. We have to work, right? We have to feed our kids. We have to, whatever XYZ is for you, there are things that you have. Outside of those constraints, though, we have the choice on how we spend that time. And a reframe that's quick and easy that I offer to people is, instead of saying, I have to do this, say, this isn't important to me. So for an example, oh, I have to clean the house. Reframe it and say to yourself, or say out loud, cleaning the house isn't important to me, and see how that feels for you. For me, that's 100% true. Cleaning the house at this stage is not a priority for me. So I have to clean the house and take that off of my pressure list because it's not actually important to me, right? I have to work out today. I have to get healthy. I have to move my body. You say to yourself, getting healthy and having a healthy lifestyle is not important to me. If that feels like, ooh, wait, no, it is important to me, then you've identified a value. And then you can keep that thing on your list as something that's important to you and view it as a positive thing you can get excited about because it's contributing, rather than I have to do this. So that's one quick and easy reframe that I like to offer.
Do you think as well that just changing that ideology around a task completely changes it? Because, like, I'm a big person with lists, right?
Me too.
I'm a list person, and I find it's a lot easier to to manage things into bite size, and when I complete a list, I feel this sense of achievement. And I also find that if I write a list of all the things that need doing, very similar to what you just said, I can prioritize them a little bit. I'll use Microsoft To Do as my to-do list, and I can even do that on that software. I can go high priority, not high priority. And what I tend to find when I do this is, even though I've listed some things, it's really not a priority, I really don't want to do that, but I'll get them done. One thing I'm personally bad at, though, Jill, and you may have had this before, is even when I have a list like that, I'm quite a bad procrastinator. And even though I've got stuff that's high priority to me, I'll tend to chip away at the stuff that's easier, even though it has low value, but it's easier. So in doing that, is that kind of similar to what you're saying about going through each thing and going, right, that's not priority, but how do sometimes the things that are high priority and high value they give you less reward, let's say. So they need to be done. They are a priority, but you don't really get much joy out of it. So where do you find that balance, that line then, where it's like, okay, well, I could spend time doing the things that I do enjoy, but they're not really a high priority in the long run.
Okay, I'm glad you brought that up. Have you ever heard of the analogy "eat your frog"?
I haven't.
Okay, it's super fun. The story or the idea that goes behind this is, if the first thing that you had to do every single day was eat a live frog, nothing worse could happen to you during the day. That's sort of the background story, right? And so there's a productivity expert named Brian Tracy. He actually wrote a book called Eat That Frog. But he did it based on the idea of making your frog the most important thing on your to-do list that you don't want to do. Yeah. So the way that he approaches it is, you eat your frog first thing in the morning. You do the hardest thing. You do the thing that you want to put off, because when you eat that frog, it gives you protein and momentum for the rest of the day. You've accomplished the biggest thing first. It doesn't really matter if you accomplish any of the other small things that day, because you've had such a big win in the morning. The other reason you eat it first rather than letting it like sit in your desk, staring at you, getting grosser and grosser, is that it feels less appealing to have to eat that frog at the end of the day, because it's been staring at you all day and making you feel gross. And it's like getting bigger maybe, or it's warm and you wanted the cold frog, who knows what, right? But if you put a task off that's important, it's going to feel bigger. It's going to be harder to do it. So this idea of eat your frog is a tactic that we can use to get those things done that we have to do, those responsibilities that we don't really feel like doing, but we have to, do them first thing in the day. And so that's my first suggestion. The second thing that I really wanted to touch on was, instead of having a to-do list, we can have a results list. And so instead of putting down the tasks that you need to accomplish, we boil it down into the result you want to see. And each day, well, I like to even just have 3 results for a week, right? Each week, you're going to have 3 results on your list. All of a sudden, your list is smaller. You know, in the back of your mind, all the tasks that come with the result, right? The first thing of the 3 that you should do is identify the frog and do that first. And then the other 2 things are the only things you have to focus on that week, that are things you feel like you have to do, right? And that is a way that we can take away some of the overwhelm of these things that we have to do. And it's, if it's hard for people to flip their mind right away, because it can happen in an instant, but there's so much resistance, right? So if you're in that space where you're still feeling like, oh, Jill, this is, you don't understand. We got stuff we have to do. It is not easy. Like, I know. So if you're in that mind frame still, it's going to be easier for you to narrow down your have to do's to 3 things and view them as results, because then again, the result is valuable to you, and link that to a value. And it all comes back to that, because if you can slowly chip away at changing how you think about it, it's gonna eventually pile up and snowball, and the mindset shift will happen. You won't even realize it. And all of a sudden, one day, you're going to be thinking about these things in a completely different manner, which is going to free up that energy and that headspace that you've been wasting on being anxious and upset and stressed about it and overwhelmed.
Interesting. And I agree. And I feel like with those main tasks that are high value, but you really don't want to do, I tend to find that if I focus on how I know I'm going to feel once that's done, that can overtake a little bit. That can almost remove that dread, so to speak. Let's just say it's just a day-to-day job. Let's say, okay, I've got my parents coming around this afternoon. True story, right? Now, I grew up living in a show house, pretty much, right? An IKEA show house is what I call it at my parents' house. In other words, every time you go around to my mum's house, who's in this group? She's not watching, but she'll watch this back. She's in this group. it's like a show house. Everything is immaculate, right? So the pressure that's put on me, right, is now when I know they're going to come around to my house, I've got to make sure it looks. She'll say it's not important, but that's the pressure I put on myself. So I'm already thinking, oh no, I'm going to have to hoover, I'm going to have to do all this, and normally that would stress me out. But one thing that I do to flip that, Joe, is basically go, well, how am I going to feel after that's done? If that's a necessary task I need to achieve, yes, it's a big task. It's one of the more higher value tasks, but that feeling at the end is what is worth it. And I guess if we want to go into hormones, endorphins and stuff, technically there is a chemical element to that. That's not even just that. There's a real science to that. Michelle, one of my clients here, she commented, she said, I prefer to call my list my daily goals rather than to-dos, because that way I feel like I've achieved something at the end of the day. That's a bit similar to what I just said and what you were saying before. It almost feels like if I can go to bed and feel, that's done, whereas I leave it till the end of the day, like you say, it just grows and it gets even more undesirable to do.
Mm-hmm. I love that.
Daily goals. So yeah, I mean, if I'm trying to bring this into fitness a little bit, then what would you say then, Jill? If someone might say, okay, exercise, a workout, right? That's one of the things that people know there is a reward at the end. They know they're going to feel better. They know it once it's done, it's good. But let's say people don't have the time to do a workout in the morning, which might be the optimal way to do that. You could say, okay, well, if you get the workout done in the morning, which I do tell people is the best time, because no matter what happens for the rest of your day, kind of tying into the frog analogy a little bit, you've got the workout done, that's the bit you didn't want to do, and now no matter anything, you could have the worst day, right, that day, but you can always have in the back of your mind, well, at least I worked out today, and there's always a payoff. But what if you literally can't do it in the morning? You've got nothing to do other than to just wait and wait. You might go to work, you might go shopping, you might have your kids and go, or perhaps you have to wait for the kids to go to bed to do your workout. And think, oh, God, I've got to do that workout at the end of the day. So how would you tailor that? Obviously, it's an individual basis, and we're trying to generalize things here, but let's use that as an example. What if you literally can't wait you have to wait till the end of the day?
Okay. Lots of things here. First off, I fell into this trap early on when I was getting into personal development because everyone talked about a morning routine, which included moving your body and journaling, blah, 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 all the things. Everyone I was learning from had this morning routine. And I'm here with kids who wake up at 4:30 a.m. And I'm like, not only am I not waking up at 3:30 in the morning, but if I did, those little minions would hear me and they'd wake up and they would know and it would be thwarted, right? So for many years, when my kids were small, I didn't do any exercise because it was not as important a value to me as some of the other things like getting through my day without melting down or whatever. Like there are some points in your life, certainly, where some of your priorities are going to have to fall off, right? But if you're in a place where it is, you want to make it work, you think you can make it work, but mornings aren't accessible for you, flip it on its head. Do the evening routine, right? If you feel like you can't have the energy after the kids go to bed, is it possible to have some at-home kind of things that you could do without having to leave the house? Because as a single or solo parent for so long, I wasn't able to leave the house once the kids were in bed because I was the only one there, right? Can you get yourself a set of weights? Can you do some exercises on a yoga mat? Can you have a video? There's so many free videos online, right? And they have access to you, right? Your followers. And so can you do something, even in small pockets of time, that A, you can have your kids join in with you, or B, you could have someone else help you with the kids during that time. Is it like the neighborhood kid who comes and acts as a mother's helper? So you have a half an hour to yourself, right? Even in the beginning, I encourage people to do small steps It doesn't have to be all or nothing. If you're making the intention and you're setting yourself up and just doing 5 minutes, if that's all you get before you get interrupted, if it's 10 minutes before you get interrupted, you're still, James Clear would say, casting a vote for the type of person you want to be every time you start that exercise routine. So you can't expect it to be flawless in the beginning, just like with anything else, especially if our kids are getting used to the idea that we're taking time for ourselves. Right now, I'll have my daughter on the yoga mat in my basement while I'm working on the elliptical. And if she's there, I know I'm not getting my best workout, But sometimes if I have the opportunity to work from home, I'll work out on my lunch break, or if I'm feeling like I didn't get any exercise during the day and I have to do it, it's almost bedtime. Maybe they're on their little tablets or their phones, or I turn on the TV for half an hour and I say, hey guys, you enjoy this. Mommy's going to go do this, right? Or, we can get creative if we just open our minds on how to fit in this time, if we take the pressure of it being exactly as we expect it to be off. That's my sort of best advice, specifically when it comes to working out.
So there was a little microphone issue there.
That's okay.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. And again, like you said a bit about, having your daughter on a yoga mat where you did elliptical. You're right. You're not going to have the optimal workout, but it's a payoff, and I think it's not everything has to run perfectly. What would people rather have, perfection or have a smoother transition into their day? And I think, like you said, just even little things. I've given advice to this before when people about like morning workouts, like go to sleep in your workout gear, right, in your active wear. People are, oh no, I don't want to do that. I'm uncomfortable. I'm like, yeah, but you wake up in the morning, you're already there. You've eliminated one of those processes, which is having to get up, get your pajamas off, put your sports bra on, get your active fit. That alone can be one step that you've eliminated, right? Which might be putting you off because you've woke up, you're in your active wear. Oh, do you know what? Okay, I even say to people another time, okay, what is it when we're talking about habits, which is tied in with mindset? And I'm a big guy on habits. We're habitual creatures. Okay, stretching, right? Not even necessarily workouts. Let's say you want to start stretching. Well, what is a habit that most people, I'll say to people, what is a habit that you do subconsciously without even giving it thought? Oh, my morning coffee, right? That's me. That's a lot of people. I've got my coffee machine. Okay, well, what if you put your workout mat or your exercise mat on the kitchen floor right next to your coffee machine? Whilst you put the kettle on or put your coffee machine on, quickly on the floor in your activewear, and you do a plank or you do a couple of sit-ups or whatever it may be. You've attached something to a habit you already do that's already on your to-do list. It's a non-negotiable, let's call it, on your day-to-day to-do list, waiting for your morning coffee. So would you agree with that one of the ways that you can make things easy for yourself is, well, you've kind of said it, by having your daughter on the mat whilst you go on the elliptical? It's like it's managing a way to fuse them together. It's like, okay, well, here's something I know I'm going to always have time to do, right? Which is make a coffee. So why not try and find a way to align something on my to-do list or on my goal list to something that I don't particularly want to do, but mix it in with something that I already do to make that process easier?
Yeah, that's fantastic. That's referred to as habit stacking, and it's a super effective way to create a new habit. It's also something I like to share with people. Tony Robbins calls it net time, so no extra time, net. And it's doing things that maybe you want to do that are just for you or you're trying to fit in at the same time as you're doing something else. So it's not going to take you any extra time. So whether that's, doing your planks while you're waiting for your coffee because you would just be standing there staring at the coffee machine waiting for it to drip, right? Or whether that's, taking it away from fitness for a second, if you are interested in reading and you want to get more books in your life, right? Just pleasure, just for you. Can you get an audiobook and listen to it on the train or the car, right? Can you do that while you're already doing something else? So that's really cool, net time. And one thing that you've just made me think of, and I can't for the life of me remember what the term is. Again, it's James Clear, but the idea of giving yourself a reward if you do the thing. So, making, again, like you've suggested, your environment is more powerful than your motivation, right? If you can tie a reward. So for me, it's listening to an audiobook, but for someone, it could be something else. I only listen to my audiobook when I'm on the elliptical. If I don't get my workout in, I don't get to listen to my book that day. And so tying that in, something you want, that's the carrot, that's the reward, that's, to something that you want to achieve, is a really effective way to do that as well. And then one thing also there's so many things in my mind that I want to share. One thing is time confetti. And so this idea, again, in these small pockets of time throughout the day that we have, using them effectively, as you've touched on. There was a researcher from Harvard named Ashley Willens who identified we actually have more free time than previous generations. And that's because of things like the ATM at the bank. We're not standing in line. It's things like the washing machine, right? Because we're not washing our clothes by hand anymore. We have more time than previous generations, but it doesn't feel like it because it's in small pockets throughout the day. And she calls that time confetti. Like if you just picture all these like little pockets of time throughout the day, like confetti. And so what she encourages people to do is start to pay attention to where those 5 minutes are, to where those 10 minutes are. And what I do is I have just a list on my iPhone. Again, I'm big into lists like you, so this might be something that would work for you or people like us. Have a time confetti list. When you find yourself paying attention, you're going to realize, oh, I've got 5 minutes here. I'm waiting at the doctor's office, or I'm on hold, or whatever. When you've got those pockets of 5 minutes, you pull out your phone and you think, well, what can I do, right? Is it send a text or a voice memo to your mom or to a friend you've been thinking of? Is it, are you carrying around your book? You can pick it up and read 3 or 4 pages. Is it you can do some deep breathing exercises? Are you going to practice your gratitude, like sit-ups, whatever it is? It's also really helpful on a list like that to, beside the task, put a dash in the number of minutes it's going to take you to do. So if you're overwhelmed, like, oh, I've got too many options, you can look at your list and say, okay, here are the ones that take 5 minutes. Here are the ones that take 10 minutes. And it makes it a little bit easier for your brain. It's one less thing to worry about because decision fatigue, right, is a real problem. So, the idea of time confetti has been really helpful for me, but it takes some practice to identify these pockets of time before you can really start to use them.
These little terms like time confetti, the frog analogy and stuff. It's very interesting what you said there, which is we complain about not having time, but you're exactly right. Like 20, 30 years ago, we had even less time than what we had now in the same 24 hours. Nothing's moved. I'm a big physics guy, right? Time is relative. It's something we created. It doesn't exist. Time and space. I'm not going to go into the quantum mechanics of it, but basically, it is something that society has created, and I believe that pressure, the fact that we have to add a leap year every 4 years because we have to keep our time in line, otherwise, because the Earth doesn't actually take exactly 365 days to go around the sun. Little side note for anyone who didn't know that. That's why we had a leap year to try and bring everything back with the Gregorian calendar. So I believe because of that, that's why we had that pressure. And it was so interesting what you said there. It's like you're so right. We used to go down to the bank physically and put money in and pay for stuff. We used to. I'm trying to think of some other examples, but there's loads in my head that I can't think of. But now we have technology, we have AI, everything's so there. And yet it almost feels, Joe, as if despite all these things that are helping us with the convenience, we're even more stressed. It's like And I guess you could look at it the other end, and from a technology standpoint, I can see it where a slightly older generation might be more stressed by that convenience, because now it's like, well, now I've got different apps that I need to run, and that's actually taking more time to set this up, and I've got more device, more. Most people's kitchens now, they don't just have an oven anymore. Now there's the air fryer, there's the Ninja, there's the slow cooker. They've got this to do, and what has been there to actually help us, what conveniences are there to help us free us of more time, is actually stressing people out more, because it's more to think about and stuff. So I like what you said there, but I guess I see a counter argument for some people, because I'm trying to, you said before, me and you like lists. This is something that I think myself and you can manage a lot more. But a lot of people listening to this, they're hearing me and you say this stuff now, and it's going over their head. They're like, no. So I guess I'm trying to not counter what you're saying, because I completely agree. But I'm trying to see where people would respond and go, yeah, but hang on, I've got all these devices and apps and stuff, so now it's even more stressful. So I wanted to shift into the meditation side of things here, and actual ways of, okay, we've established some of the problems that people have with time. We've established about priorities. I want to talk a little bit about meditation and stuff, because we are talking about mindset, and I know it's something that you do and you talk about too. Is actual things to do long term to deal with depression, because I think people do have time for stuff. I personally believe the reason people think they don't have time is because of the pressure that they put on themselves. So if we walk away from that a little bit and go, okay, well, let's find a way to deal with that side of things, that pressure. I'm a big gratitude person. I'm all about gratitude lists and appreciation. I find that is my form of meditation. If someone was wanting to literally step back out themselves, go, okay, I really want to sort my mind here and my perception of things, what kind of tactics would you recommend as far as meditation is concerned? Or what do you do? What's your experience here?
It's progressed for me. I started by listening to guided meditations. There's a wonderful podcast called Meditation Minis, and she does 10-minute meditations. And so I would listen to them. If I arrived early to pick my kids up, I would pop one on, or right before I was falling asleep. Or I would take a quick, 15-minute break at my desk and do a little meditation. And that got me into the habit and understanding of what it felt like to just sort of like escape for a few minutes. Because when I tried to meditate on my own, I couldn't do it. My brain was everywhere. I was guilting myself. I was chastising myself like, oh, you're thinking this is no good, blah, blah. It was stressful.
Same.
Just counterintuitive, right? So I found guided meditation to be very helpful when I was getting going. I also find that just simple breathing techniques can be really helpful. There's lots of free guided breathing. Again, guided is helpful. Breathing techniques you can find online. There's apps for it. And once you learn how to do that, that's a way that you can get really meditating is just sort of coming back within, right? That's the point. Recentering yourself, realigning yourself, calling your energy back to you. That's the point of meditation. And so breathing is an easy way to do that doesn't need to take extra time, right? You're already breathing. So if you start to learn and understand different ways of breathing that can help you calm your nervous system or energize you or whatever it is, breathing can do a bunch of stuff for us. Nobody needs to know you're doing it, right? It doesn't need to take extra time. So breathing is a really great way to incorporate that. And lately, I've been doing guided hypnosis. So I work with a coach, a business coach, and she created a personal hypnosis track for me. But you can find generalized ones on really anything you're looking for. And I listen to that as I'm falling asleep. So again, no extra time, but your subconscious mind is very susceptible in the theta brainwave state to suggestions, right? And affirmations. And so for me, a guided hypnosis that goes really deep into my subconscious is the easiest way for me to make big changes in my life, but also the first part of that is the relaxing and the getting in that meditative state, that hypnosis state. And I find that to be so quick now because it takes practice. Meditation is something that really does take practice. But I think if we take the pressure off ourselves for it to be perfect and just sort of understand that the point is really just reconnecting quietly with yourself, even for the intent of just being able to hear your own intuition once in a while. It's noisy in the world. And your intuition doesn't need to yell. It's just so quiet and you can't hear it unless you're in this quiet state.
Yeah, I've been doing the same, like the guided hypnosis and stuff like that. I went to. She's like a Reiki healer originally. That's how she started. Now she's kind of developed further into a psychic medium. She's a client of mine, and she offered to do a hypnotic induction. I was a bit, I don't know about this, but God's honest truth, she must have touched my raw subconscious or something, because I came out of that with, it was a very enlightening experience. And I'm a big believer in subconscious, the subconscious mind. It holds on to a lot of stuff, and I say to people, particularly my clients or even my listeners here on the podcast, which is, you mentioned before that little voice, that listen to your intuition, that little voice in your head, before you stress yourself out and say stuff, I don't have time, I'm not, or even motivation, like I said at the start of this, that's the two things for me. That's the two. What's the word, that just sort of drawbacks where people are a bit standoffish, okay, or the defense modes. It's usually time and motivation, and I think that both of them are kind of tied into the same thing, which is what you said. That it's that intuition, it's that voice in your head, and what we really need to do is tap into that. Okay, how do we change that inner voice, how we perceive our things, and then what I believe is everything that we've said so far in this episode falls into place after that. I feel like a lot of the advice that you've given here today, Jill, and I've given, it's great stuff, but until people have really tapped into that inner voice and I guess self-image is the term I'm trying to go for here, of what people perceive of themselves. And I can't handle this. I don't have time for this. I'm not motivated enough to do this. I can't do this. Even down to what you just said about meditation, right? I'm the exact same. I'm stressing myself out. Oh, I'm allowing thoughts into my head. Oh, I can't do this guided meditation. I'm already. But it all comes down to how we perceive ourselves, that self-compassion, that self-image. And I believe, I don't know if you agree, Jill, that a lot of the time we've been talking about time management and priorities and lists and stuff. But I think all of that, from a mindset perspective, all comes into place. In reality, the fundamental here is our own self-image and or intuition, as you used, which is what we perceive of our life. And you said another word before, which was environment. And I'm a big believer in environment dominates so much, consciously or subconsciously. It's like when we talk about nutrition, I'll have a lot of clients, I'm really struggling. I reach for the sweets and stuff. I'm a real sugar addict. I'm like, you're not actually. It's the environment. And I'll say this to people: how many times? When is it that you reach for the chocolate, right? Or when is it you or any bad habit that you shouldn't be doing, right? But let's say for argument's sake, we're talking about chocolate. Yeah, I'm going to indulge it. And I'll say to people, okay, let's assess your environment before we start assuming we're addicted to sugar and blaming something else. Let's look at our environment. Okay. What are you doing when you're craving this sugar? What's around you? Are you watching TV? Look at your room, the room that you're in? Are you in your living room? Is it dark? What's the lighting like? What's the background noise like? Who are you with? And people sort of think, well, why are you asking these questions? I'm like, because environment can dominate a lot of subconscious triggers. So for me, it's and I say this to people: you're not walking around with a big bar of dairy milk, right? Or whatever might be the top equivalent. But just FYI, side note, one of the main reasons I want to come to Canada is for maple syrup. I absolutely love it. But I digress. But you never see people walking around with a big bar of chocolate, walking around town. Where do they do it? At home, in the living room, watching Netflix. And this is the point I'm getting at. It's the environment that is causing those triggers. So I think trying to bring this back to what we're talking about, I think when people wake up and are like, I don't have time to do my list, I don't have time to do meditation, assess your environment. What's really making you believe this of yourself, and how can we step out of that mindset? And I think that's pretty much what you were talking about. Listen to your intuition, follow that inner voice that's hiding in there. And bring me on to what I want to kind of finish off with you, Jill, is mindset shift. I'm a big believer in healthy mind, healthy body, but I believe you can't achieve any of these things unless you really shift that mindset. So tapping into that, Jill, what's your speciality on the mindset shift side of things?
I think it really comes down to the identity that you hold for yourself and what you believe is true and what you believe is possible. Because you can listen to as many podcasts as you want. You can read as many books, watch as many YouTube videos, and have the best intentions for change or growth or whatever you're working towards. But if you don't believe that that's possible for you, you are going to set yourself up in situations to prove to yourself that you're right. That's basically the function of the reticular activating system, is what you tell your brain, it goes and finds things to prove you right. So if you're telling yourself that you can't stop snacking on chips in front of Netflix in the evening, you're going to find situations and you're going to be putting yourself in situations where that's true, right?
Yeah.
But if you tell yourself, I don't do that anymore, you're going to stop buying those chips, right? You're going to not identify as someone who snacks on chips. You're not going to need to buy them. Similarly, we only ever achieve as much as we believe we are worth. And so worthiness and self-worth, as you had touched on earlier, is so vital to this equation, because you're going to self-sabotage yourself. And so finding a way to do the work, and it is work. It takes so much work. It's not an easy fix, right? We can sit here and show examples and give tips, but you got to do the work to really change your identity from the inside. That's where it comes from.
A lot of these terms here, identity, self-image, intuition, inner voice, I think they're all different terms to describe what I believe is the same thing. It's us. It's us. It's listen to yourself. A lot of people who've been watching the stream, Jill, they've loved this. We've had some comments saying this has been very interesting. Thank you very much. One says, I agree. Lots of notes taken. Good. Note taking.
Good.
That's one of the things that we've talked about.
Yeah.
And Michelle says some great ideas to introduce. I've got someone saying I need to leave to collect my daughter from school. We'll catch up. But lovely listening to Jill. So we've had a lot of people felt the benefit of this, Jill. A lot of people liking these new ideas to hopefully go and implement as we head into this colder period. And what would to sort of, I always do this with all my guests. Do you remember Jerry Springer, right? Good old fashioned Jerry Springer show. Remember at the end he used to have Jerry's final thought. Right.
Ooh, yes.
Well, I always put my guests on the spot here and go, right, what's your final thought? If you could sum up, if you could give my listeners some advice in just one final thought, what would that be? If you could summarize everything and go, right, here's your platform, here's your microphone, go.
I think the message that really wants to come through for me today is trust yourself. trust that you have the tools you need. Trust that you are resourceful enough to find things to help you. Trust that you have the abilities, and just trust that you're worthy of the thing you're trying to do. It all comes down to self-trust, because that is the thing you can control over everything else. So that's, I think, my parting words for today is trust yourself, trust the process, trust your abilities.
I love that. I love that. Emma says, is there a link to Jill's podcast? Yes, I'm going to, I will attach that. I will get it off Jill and I will post that. And for those listening on the podcast, you will find it in the show notes that will attach. Jill, where else can people find you on social media? If people are a little bit more interested in the stuff that you've said here today and want to go and check out a little bit more about you, where's the best place for them to go and do that?
Instagram and Facebook are the places that I'm active online. So it's at Grow Like a Mother on both of those platforms. And my website has some great tips and a resources page as well. So that's jillwright.ca.
Oh, sorry, I just muted that because I could hear my little dog bloody barking his head off in my garden. My wife must have let him out at the worst time. Shut up, your shit. Awesome stuff. I will plug the links to those in the show notes, and for those on the live stream, I will post that in the group later. Jill, awesome stuff. Blew my mind. I think we align on a lot of our ideologies here, and hopefully people have taken something from this, some ideas to go and implement going forward. Time management, completed it, tick that off the list. We've smashed that today, and hopefully people have had some new ideas to go with, and go, look, we have them 24 hours in a day, but some of the stuff that Jill has shared with us today in terms of the to-do lists, in terms of the ranking of the priority, reward, all that sort of stuff, implement it, and hopefully go and smash your 2023, the rest of 2023, managing your time and your motivation. Jill, thank you very much for coming on. It's been fantastic. I will make sure to go and check out your stuff. Make sure to go and listen to Jill's podcast. Go and follow her on social media. And yeah, hopefully one day we can chat again, because I think we could have probably spoke for 8 hours. I think there was a lot of stuff that we could have talked about today.
Absolutely, Callum. It's been my pleasure. Thank you for sharing your audience with me. And if we can, I'd love to do a part 2, because I think you're right. There's a lot of wisdom that we can share, and when you have this sort of cohesive relationship, that's really important. So it's really been a gift. Thank you.
No problem at all. Got a lot of thank you, Jills, in the comments on the live stream. Awesome stuff. All right, Jill, thank you very much. Take care, and I look forward to part 2 and chatting with you again.
Perfect. Thank you.